Hello, I'm Bob Smearfack, but not really. This series is designed for theological seminary students with approaching exams who have not had time to read the Bible, and for backmasking theorists. Play this one backwards to find a conspiracy involving Harry Potter, the Teletubbies, Stairway to Heaven, and Hotel California. Matthew chapter 26. Let's go. In this chapter, the JC had just wrapped up a procedural on how not to get your goats and sheep mixed up when he floated out a reminder to the crew about some upcoming calendar entries. He said, in 48 hours it's that huge smorgasbord they always do on the Passover, and I'm gonna get ratted out so a bunch of dudes can hammer spikes through my extremities and hang me out in the breeze. Meanwhile, there was a huge consultation between the top-ranking padres, the scroll-copying experts, and some other guys who were way up in the patriarchy over at the pimped-out crib of Caiaphas, the managing director of the priest department. They all vented about Jesus and how they might, in a delicate way, get their meat hooks into the J-Man so they could put him underground. But they agreed, let's not put this in motion on that holiday when everyone is inhaling food, because that could cause some major indigestion. Cut to Bethany. Jesus is getting downtime at the pad of a guy named Simon, whose skin was rotting off. Not a great angle for dinner conversation, which might have been the reason Jesus never brought it up while he was eating. Or he didn't get a chance, because right then a lady walked up with an ivory container and dumped a bunch of pricey skincare product over his head. So the Jesus boys got bent out of shape. Never mind the awkwardness of springing a new root oil massage on a guy while he's having dinner. They were very concerned about the unwise expenditure. They said, what gives? That lotion could have pulled in a lot of cash and gone out to people who are flat broke. When the J-Man got his mind around that, he said, get off the girl's back. She's been working up a good thing for me here, because there's going to be financially struggling people hanging around forever, but FaceTime with me is about to get limited. And because she oiled me up like this to get me ready for my funeral, he said, I'm telling you straight up, any place in the universe where my story gets airplay, this is going to be a main chapter so that no one forgets about this woman and what she's done. That woman must have known right then that she'd made it, but probably didn't know that not even her name would make it into the divinely inspired scroll about all this that would come out 80 years later. Although another guy who would jot down his own scroll a few years after that pegged her as Mary, the sister of a guy Jesus resuscitated once. But we'll never know for sure. Too bad for her. Whoever she was. Anyway, next thing you know, one of the fabulous Jesus boys, a dude who went by the handle of Judas Iscariot, set up a meeting with the top religious hoo-haws. What he wanted to know was, how much? How much for the Jesus? I can get you a Jesus. They settled on an even 30, which he must have thought was a fair price because he went into full planning mode to come up with a good Jesus trap. Then the calendar flipped over to day one of that religious holiday where everybody gorges on baked goods made without any yeast. So the Jesus boys located the J-Man and bounced a question off him. Where do you want us to make Passover reservations for you? Jesus went all mysterious and gave them some cryptic instructions to head downtown and talk to a certain man. Tell him the boss says that it's all getting ready to happen and that me and my crew are going to drop by for the big dinner. We're not sure why Jesus was so hush-hush about the dude's identity, but at face value, he just seemed to be saying, I know a guy. Whatever. The boys did what they were told and cruised over there to set it all up. Evening rolled around and Jesus pulled up a chair with the designated dozen. Now, right in the middle of the main course, he blurted out, by the way, one of you guys is going to stab me right in the back. Nothing will shut down a meal between friends like a broad, unspecified accusation of impending betrayal. This was quite upsetting to the assembled dinner guests, and they each checked in, asking, am I the guy? But Jesus only heaped on the suspense. He said, it's going to be the guy who reaches for the bowl at the same time as me. Now, if all this were playing out in the cinema, this would be the moment that moviegoers would start shouting at the screen, don't reach for the bowl. Back slowly away from the dipping sauce. It just makes sense that the best way not to implicate yourself here would be to not do the thing that he said the guilty guy was going to do. Maybe they all got that, because there is no mention after that of anyone dipping into that bowl. Regardless, Jesus went on to describe Mr. Guilty's dim future. He said, for me, it's all going down as planned in the ancient scrolls, but for this guy, it would have been rosier for this guy if he'd never been ejected from the womb, which is a mildly paradoxical statement. If a guy had never been born, how could that be good for that guy? What guy? But Jesus was known for making an occasional obtuse remark. The bigger secret he didn't reveal was why his omnipotent three-in-one self, who had to have known about all this from the moment the universal clock started ticking, didn't preempt the problem roughly 30 years before when it had come time for this Judas fella to be conceived. One can only assume a fall guy was a necessary step in the divine equation. But as if things hadn't gotten bizarre enough, Judas himself, who had to have been walking very carefully to keep everyone from hearing those silver coins jingling in his pockets, proceeded to ask perhaps the dumbest question in the history of dumb. Dude, is it me? Maybe his decision not to stay under the radar was a strategic attempt to blend in with the general cacophony of guys asking the same question. It didn't matter, because the J-Man dropped the mystery act and said, bingo. This was a turning point in history. The betrayer of our Lord and Savior had just been tagged in an upstairs room with limited exits, surrounded by 11 full-grown men who now had the singular opportunity to proactively sequester one Judas Iscariot under 24-hour guard until this whole thing blew over, thus averting an ill-advised public execution, several crusades, and possibly a couple of world wars. Who knows? But dinner was ready, so they moved ahead, and that moment passed. Skipped to somewhere in between the salad and dessert, and Jesus made a couple of memorable toasts. He led off with a food toast, in which he cast a spell on an unleavened loaf and handed out pieces of it, saying, "Go ahead, eat it. It's my body, don't you know?" Taken metaphorically or not, the next bite for the diners at this table could not have been the same as the one before. At least the second toast couldn't have taken them by quite as much surprise, but it packed its own punch. He passed around a fruity beverage and said, "Bottoms up, 'cause this is the sticky red stuff coming straight out of my veins, which is going to close a new deal for everybody and wipe their moral slate clean." But he said, "I'm telling you, there's not going to be one more drop of this Merlot for me until we pour a fresh round of drinks to celebrate my dad's new product launch." Then they enjoyed a little group karaoke and went out for a hike. When they reached high ground on the Mount of Olives, Jesus got the boys prepared for a bumpy ride. He said, "This is going to be a traumatic evening for you guys, and you're all going to take a moral dive on my account. Because check out the ancient book where it says a guy who watches sheep is going to get the crap beaten out of him, and all his even-toed ungulates are going to go running off in every direction. But when I get back up again, I'll be out ahead of you on my way back to square one, Galilee." To which Peter replied, "Nuh-uh. Even if every guy around takes a moral dump," he said, "I'll still be standing strong." So Jesus shot back, "Read my lips, dude. Tonight, before an adult male Gallus domesticus makes that annoying announcement that it's morning already, you're gonna snub my ass 3 times. But Rocky dug in his heels. He said, "Even if we both go into cardiac arrest, I'm not going to snub you." The rest of the fabulous Jesus boys felt the same way. They said, "Yeah, us too." Then they all rolled into Gethsemane, basically a public park that must have been open late. Jesus said to the boys, "You guys take a load off, and I'll head up the road a piece and have a conversation with the father part of myself." But then he went ahead and took a few of the fellas with him, Rocky and those 2 kids who had decided to quit their dad Zebedee's fishing business. And then he started to take a big mood swing. He said, "My spirit is tapped out. I feel like I'm gonna die. You guys hang here and keep an eye open." So Jesus pushed on solo for a short distance and then face-planted. He dialogued with the God part of himself and put it like this: "If there is any way I can take a pass on the menu you've got planned for me, that would be super. But it's not up to me. I'm gonna defer to you on this." Then Jesus headed back up the path and caught his boys doing an impromptu snooze. He woke up Peter and was like, "Dude, is staying conscious for 60 minutes too much to ask here? Keep a lookout and do a little supplicating so you don't get pulled over to the dark side. I can see you've got good intentions, but your body is lagging behind your brain." So Jesus headed back up the way and picked up his internal dialogue where he'd left off. He said to the father part of himself, "Hey, if this menu isn't going away until I order the cross and nails combo, then let's have it your way." And then he hiked back down, only to find the lads hibernating again. This time, he didn't say anything. Maybe he was so disappointed that he just had no words. Or maybe he got it. Asking a guy to fill up on bread and wine, go for a long walk, and then sit still for an hour without passing out is bordering on unreasonable, especially when it's really past bedtime. So he just turned around and headed back over to the prayer zone for round 3. But this time he repeated everything he'd already said before. Maybe a rebroadcast was a good idea just as a backup transmission. It was mountainous terrain, and we know how spotty coverage can be. He eventually wound up back with the boys and just told them to sleep it off. Now's the time to recharge, because soon your boy's gonna get sold down the river to some really nasty people. And by soon, he must have meant now, because the very next thing he said was, "Up and at 'em, the double-crosser is in the house." Then, pretty much mid-sentence, Judas, one of the now not-so-fabulous Jesus boys, strolled into the park with a sizable posse of hooligans armed with a variety of both sharp and blunt objects, there on behalf of the Priesty boys and the local patriarchs. But Judas had this set up to go down by the numbers. He told them, "When you see me kissing a dude, that's the guy. Grab him." So he sidled up to the J-Man and said, "Hey, boss," and laid one on him. Then Jesus replied with the possibly rhetorical, undoubtedly moot question, "Hey, buddy, what are you up to?" But that was it. The wrecking crew was on the scene and they nabbed him. But wait, not so fast. Any climactic arrest needs a valiant resistance. One of the Jesus boys whipped out a scimitar and took a pass at a dude who worked for the big religious hoo-haws and lopped his ear right off, which was either a high-precision swing from a guy with some samurai training or a bungled decapitation attempt. Now, in the addition edition of the magic scroll yet to be written, titled John, it says it was Rocky himself who did the Ginsu move. And the Luke scroll says Jesus went and slapped the guy's ear right back on. Either way you slice it, Jesus didn't like it. He said, "Aw, hey man, put that away." He said, "Come on, do you think I can't just send out a distress signal to the Skyman and get him to launch a dozen angelic squadrons right off the flight deck?" Basically, he was saying he could fight his own battles. But he added that the reason he didn't was because he had to make sure all the ancient scrolls were right. It had to be this way, even if only for bookkeeping purposes. Right about then, Jesus put a question to the whole crowd. Am I like a petty delinquent that you have to gang up on with knives and sticks to take down? We did a lot of classes together over at the church house, and you didn't all try to dogpile me then. But again, he let them know that they really hadn't had a choice in the matter. This was all predicted on paper a long time ago, and it's happening this way now so that all those divine pamphlets would be accurate. Then, every one of the fabulous Jesus boys picked a direction and burned rubber. It's one of those moments when you find out who your friends really are, whether you like it or not. Anyway, now that they had Jesus in tow, everybody else headed over to hook up with Caiaphas, the top guy on the priestly totem pole, where there was a sizable crowd of dudes assembled, some of whom were professional scroll copiers, the original Xerox men, and others who'd been alive so long that they enjoyed a respected rung on the social ladder. But Peter had managed to get there too. He'd pulled a little stealth action and slid into Caiaphas's swank pad to sit with the waitstaff and see how it all turned out. Now, the top religious hoo-haws, the older guys, and everybody on the legal team got to work. They tried to scrounge up some lies they could use to execute Jesus. For such a serious endeavor, the prosecution may have seemed a bit disorganized, however, characterized by the next two verses. They sought false witnesses, but they didn't find any, though a lot of false witnesses came, but they didn't find any. Then finally, two false witnesses showed up. It could have been simply a secretarial problem. It was late, and the poor soul recording the minutes may just not have been feeling it. But the two liars who just rolled in testified that they heard Jesus say he could wrecking ball the whole main temple house and build a new one in 72 hours, which was arguably not false. Later on, when the scroll called John came out, it turns out Jesus did say that. Jesus could have clarified his intent about that. He could have said, "Yes, I did say that, but you're false witnessing because what I meant was that if you kill my body, then 3 days later I'm going to auto-spawn and be right back in the game." But he took no such opportunity because the high priest Kai jumped up and said, "I can't hear you. What are these guys saying about you?" So Jesus took the fifth. Kai said, "I order you in the name of the Sky Captain to level with us about whether you're holding the Messiah card, that you're the male offspring of El Numero Uno." So Jesus offered this reply, "What you said." Then he added, "But I'll tell you this, at some point after now, you're going to check out your boy reclining on God's right, and then riding a nimbocumulus down from Skytown." That really freaked Kai out, to the point he started tearing his outfit off. He announced to everyone that Jesus had just said about the worst thing you could possibly say. Then he said, "The prosecution rests, because, check it out, you just heard him say about the worst thing he could possibly say." Then he asked them, "What do you think?" So they all said he pretty much deserved to die. They were very upset with Jesus and lost their tempers. They blew saliva right in his face and pushed him around, and then some of them cut loose with some slapping action. Amid all this acting out, somebody said, "Hey, if you're such a big psychic, tell us the name of the guy that just punched you in the face, LOL." Now, Peter was still sitting in the cheap seats for all of this when a chick walked up to him and said, "Hey, you're one of the fabulous Jesus boys." But Rocky backpedaled like a politician. He said, "I have no recollection of this." So he excused himself and went out on the veranda. But another girl pegged him and said to everybody, "Hey, that's one of the fabulous Jesus boys." And Peter dodged again. "Who's Jesus? I don't know no Jesus." You know, any other night an unemployed fisherman would have been thrilled to have two young women at a social event approach him within the space of 10 minutes. It's too bad these two were trying to roll him. Maybe he should have read the situation better and seen that it was a good time to leave. But he hung around a little longer until a bunch of people ganged up on him and said, "Hey, you're not fooling anybody. We know you're part of that Jesus club because you sound like one of those guys." So Rocky came unglued. He said, "Effing effers. I don't know that effing guy, so F you mother effers." Right then a full-grown male chicken interrupted him with a bunch of crowing, as if to say, "Shut up, shut up, shut up." So Peter stopped and it hit him. Oh crap, that whole triple Jesus snubbing rooster thing. He knew it was time to leave then, and he took off and found a good place to cry it out. If you've ever seen an off-the-hook Thursday night out with the guys go from a wine and karaoke buffet all the way downhill to arrest and police brutality, then you can empathize with the fabulous Jesus boys. Not a great lead-up to the weekend, and it's not about to get better. Next in this series, we'll move on to Chapter 27. Spoiler alert, Jesus gets killed, but only for one chapter. He's such a badass that even killing him can't kill him for very long. As always, I'm not a religious figure, but if you want me to save you or damn you to hell, I'll do my best.
Bob Smearfack? What a dumbass, ignorant, fast-talking, always-lying, pea-brained, pencil-dicked, unbelievably untalented, fat-headed, narrow-minded, crap-ass, video-making, undeniably certifiable, frickin' crazy, numb-nutted waste of YouTube space and toilet paper. But not really.